Oklahoma loves to show you cowboy sunsets, friendly little towns, and flags waving in front of white steepled churches. But behind those postcards are the top 10 creepiest and most remote towns in Oklahoma. Tiny dots on the map that feel more like unfinished horror stories than peaceful hometowns. These are places shaped by disasters, unsolved tragedies, and whispered rumors the locals only share in a low voice. From campgrounds sitting right next to moss-covered graveyards to a country bridge where a young mother vanished without a trace, all the way to sand dunes that swallow your footprints under strange green flashes in the night. So buckle up, lock your doors, and let's start in a corner of Oklahoma that already feels like the edge of the world. Number 10. Quapaw. Quapaw is a small town in the far northeast corner of Oklahoma, right where the state touches Missouri and Kansas and sits close to old Route 66. On the map, it looks like harmless farm country, the kind of dot you only notice when you need gas in a bathroom. For anyone who loves spooky folklore, it sounds like a fun little detour, not a place that can quietly stack the odds against you. Out here, the famous stretch is East 50, a narrow dirt road locals call Spooklight Road or the Devil's Promenade. It is just one lane, no streetlights, no shoulder, fields on both sides like a dark ocean. Once the sun goes down, cars creep out from town and line up right in the middle of the road. Engines cut off, headlights go dark, and people sit there in the silence waiting for the hornet. Spooklight, that orange ball of light locals swear will drift down the lane. There is laughing from one car, bottles clinking in another, blue phone screens glowing as people film and joke. Then, every now and then, another driver comes around the bend and realizes the road ahead is full of parked silhouettes. That is when the story turns sharp. Local reporters keep saying the same thing in different words. The real danger on the Devil's Promenade is not the ghost light. It is the living ones. It is the drunk group standing in the middle of the lane, the truck that hits the curve too fast, the argument in the dark that nobody outside that road will ever hear. And still people come because of that one stubborn light. The spook light is usually described as an orange orb about the size of a basketball that shivers, glides across the road, and sometimes splits into smaller sparks before sliding into the fields. One legend says it is a pair of young Quapaw lovers who died badly, still searching for each other with lanterns in their hands. Another says it is a headless Osage chief stalking the promenade with a torch, hunting for the head he lost on that very ground. Skeptics point to distant headlights and tricks of the air, and some nights they might be right, but every time someone shrugs and calls it simple reflection, another driver swears the light floated up to their hood or hovered over a pasture, where there is no road at all. Every fresh story feeds the legend, and every legend brings fresh taillights back into the dark. Underneath all of this, the pattern is painfully normal. A forgotten rural road with no lighting and no warning signs has been turned into an unofficial attraction with no rules. There is no safe pull-off, no traffic control, no plan for what happens when alcohol, boredom, and curiosity meet in a place where no one is watching. It is like inviting people to have a photo session in the middle of a blacked-out back road and promising them that accidents are just rumors. So picture yourself sitting in that car, engine off, lights off, fields stretching away on both sides, one orange glow bobbing in the distance, and no easy way to tell emergency services where you are if things go sideways. Would you really put your safety on the line for a mystery light that no one can agree on, just to have a wild story for next weekend? Unless you brought your own rescue team and a detailed map of every dirt track around Quapaw, this might not be the ideal spot for a romantic late-night date. Because on the Devil's Promenade, the thing most likely to erase you from the map is not a ghost at all. It is a stranger behind the wheel who never saw you sitting there. And if one lonely road already makes you feel too alone in the dark, the next town will show you what it means to feel trapped even while the sun is still up. Number 9. Boggy Depot. Boggy Depot looks harmless when you first roll in. There are tall green trees, a still little lake, a quiet campground, and a few polite signs explaining the local history. Families show up with coolers and fishing poles, never quite realizing they are spreading picnic blankets on land that used to be one of the busiest and bloodiest crossroads in the old Indian Territory. Long before it was a state park, this was where Choctaw and Chickasaw people tried to rebuild after being forced west. What feels like empty woods now was once government, trading post and last chance all in one for people who had already lost their first home. During the Civil War, it turned into a supply point and a stopping place for troops. Soldiers came through, prisoners came through, wagons carrying the wounded and the dead came through. The uniforms and flags all changed, the ground never did. If you walk far enough from the campsites, you hit the part the brochures barely mention, the cemetery tucked against the tree line. There are stones for soldiers, for tribal leaders, for whole families who never saw the 20th century. Some names still read like roll call. Others have faded until the letters are only shallow scars in the rock. You do not need a ghost story to feel it. Your voice drops on its own. The air feels heavier than it did by the lake. Then come the little details that people only share after dark. Someone walking alone among the old graves who suddenly smells strong perfume in the middle of the woods, even though the park is empty. A photographer whose camera shuts down the moment they step between certain rows and heals itself as soon as they step back out. Campers who swear that for a second they felt someone standing right behind their shoulder, just close enough to make the hair on their arms rise. And then there is nothing there at all. Maybe it is nerves, maybe it is imagination, or maybe this town never fully emptied out. At night, the park turns from green to silver. No streetlights, no traffic noise, only the moon painting thin white stripes across the tops of the stones. The wind moves through the oak branches and over the grass, loud enough that it starts to sound like whispering when you lie in your tent and try to sleep. The insects never stop, but human voices come and go. You sit by your tiny campfire roasting marshmallows, and a single line of trees is all that stands between your sleeping bag and a hill full of people who came here and never went home again. Boggy Depot is what happens when forced removal and war are followed by half-hearted rebuilding. The living moved away and the coordinates got relabeled as a park, but the story stayed exactly where they fell. It is like a museum where someone lost the key. The exhibits are still there, they just happen to be buried under moss and headstones. So you have to ask yourself one uncomfortable question. Would you really roast marshmallows here once you understand how many lives ended on this exact piece of ground? If you ever visit, this is not a place for loud ghost hunts or silly dares. You walk softly, keep your voice low, and remember whose silence you are camping inside. And if sharing a tent line with forgotten soldiers does not bother you yet, the next place brings missing explorers, strange green flashes in the sand, and rumors of a portal nobody asked for. Number 8, Beaver. Beaver likes to introduce itself with a smile. It is a tiny Oklahoma town with a friendly main street and a sand dune park that looks perfect on a tourism flyer. People haul in their ATVs, kids roll down the hills, campers grill hot dogs under a big open sky. To most visitors, Beaver Dunes is just a fun weekend playground. To others, it is the place where the desert occasionally keeps what it likes. That is where the story stops being cute. Locals still whisper about the old Coronado expedition, the Spanish explorers who supposedly lost men out here in a burst of strange green light that nobody could explain. The official records are fuzzy, like someone erased the part that really mattered. The legend says a few soldiers simply stepped onto the sand and never came back, swallowed between one breath and the next. Centuries later, the details change, but the pattern stays the same. Someone goes out on the dunes, there is a flash, a noise, a moment where the world feels wrong. Then the desert is quiet again. In the last few decades, the story has taken on a modern shape. A small research team sets up instruments to measure the magnetic field near a patch locals call Shaman's Portal. The readings spike into nonsense, equipment dies for no reason, and a group of serious people who do this for a living suddenly find themselves talking about malfunctions they do not want to publish in any paper. One version of the tale adds a late-night visit from strangers in dark suits who politely but firmly suggest the scientists have taken enough measurements. Maybe that part is exaggeration. Maybe it is not. Either way, nobody seems eager to push their luck. Night is when the place really changes. The wind runs across the dunes like a living thing, wiping out footprints seconds after you make them. The horizon turns into a black circle where only 2 or 3 distant lights remind you that any other humans exist at all. When you kill your flashlight, there is just sand and darkness pressing in from every direction. People talk about a green flicker at the edge of their vision, a low thump from under the sand, an engine that coughs once and dies even though the tank is full. Phones lose their signal, GPS spins in circles, and for a few long moments you realize that neither your technology nor your common sense knows exactly where you are anymore. Maybe the real explanation is boring. Dangerous terrain, shifting dunes, long distances to rescue, and a human brain that does not like unsolved puzzles. That mix alone is enough to build a legend that refuses to die. Shaman's Portal feels like an open browser tab in reality. Nobody knows exactly who clicked it open or what might decide to slip through when nobody is watching the screen. So you have to ask yourself, would you really go out here at midnight just to jump your buggy across the dunes and film a few dramatic shots for social media in a place that locals casually call their own Bermuda Triangle? Out here, you do not go alone, you do not go unprepared, and you do not treat the warning signs like props. At least in Beaver, the monsters are mostly in the sand and in your head. Our next town had very real monsters, and they carried badges, shotguns, and absolutely nothing to lose. Number 7. Ingalls. On paper, Ingalls was supposed to be just another little stop in Oklahoma Territory, a dusty dot that hopes someday to grow into a proper city with stores, churches, and a tidy little main street. Every new town dreams of turning into a bustling place on the map. Ingalls just happened to turn itself into a hiding spot for one of the most dangerous outlaw gangs of its time instead. That is the moment its story veered off the brochure and straight into a wanted poster. Back in the 1890s, this quiet frontier town became a safe house for the Doolin-Dalton gang. They bought drinks in the saloon, rented rooms, stabled their horses, and, according to more than one account, passed cash around when times were thin. To some locals, they were noisy neighbors with deep pockets. To federal lawmen, Ingalls was a nest that needed to be smoked out. You can almost feel the tension building when you picture both sides walking the same dusty street, one pretending nothing is wrong, the other taking notes and waiting. It all snapped on a hot day in 1893 during what history now calls the Battle of Ingalls. United States Marshals rode in to grab the outlaws. The gang did not surrender. Shots exploded up and down the street. Several federal officers went down. So did at least one civilian who had not signed up for any of it. Windows shattered, horses panicked, and the town that wanted to be a destination suddenly became a crime scene. When the guns finally went quiet, Ingalls had its answer to the question of what happens when you turn your main street into a line of fire. The years after that were not kind. Once word spread, Ingalls picked up a new reputation as a place that had chosen the wrong friends. Investors looked elsewhere. The railroad drew its tracks in a different direction. The town that once pictured itself as the next big stop was quietly erased from the major routes. Today, what is left is mostly foundations, a marker, a cemetery, and a wide stretch of land that looks a little too empty for how loud it once was. The wind blows through the wooden sign that says Ingalls, dust lifts off the ground, the sky goes red toward evening, and there is not a single engine sound to anchor you in the present. Stand there for a while and you start to understand the moral without anyone spelling it out. This is what happens when law is weak, when money comes from cards and liquor, and everybody decides to pretend that the wanted men at the bar are just colorful characters. Ingalls is what you get when a town rolls the dice on outlaws. The house always wins, but the house does not care if the entire town burns down in the process. So ask yourself honestly, would you feel safe standing in that field knowing the last big party here ended with bodies on the ground and the future of the town bleeding out with them? This is not a cute cowboy backdrop for selfies. It is a quiet piece of earth where you come to think about the price of normalizing violence. And if you think that is wild, the next town managed to build its entire personality around booze, bullet holes, and 7 bars that probably should have come with their own life insurance policy. Number 6. Keokuk Falls. Picture a tiny river town out in the Oklahoma countryside that once tried to market itself as the place where the party never stopped. There were saloons, card tables, live music, and a steady flow of customers crossing over from the dry side of the line looking for a drink they were not supposed to have. Imagine building a town whose main business model is selling booze to people who are not supposed to be drinking. What could possibly go wrong? Back when Keokuk Falls was alive, they said there were 7 saloons crowded into a space that barely deserved the word town. People nicknamed them the 7 Deadly Saloons, and they were not entirely joking. The sidewalks were wood, the floors were wood, and just about everything in between smelled like spilled liquor, sweat, and cheap cigar smoke. Fights started over cards, over insults, over nothing at all. And more than one argument ended with someone hitting the boards hard enough to leave a dark stain. You did not really come here to relax. You came here to disappear into a crowd that did not ask questions and did not remember names very well the next morning. That was the whole trick. On the map, Keokuk Falls sat just outside the zone where alcohol was banned. On the ground, it sat exactly where the rules got blurry. Sheriffs and preachers could yell all they wanted on the dry side of the river. In town, the piano kept playing, the glasses kept clinking, and the money kept changing hands under the lamps. For a little while, it probably felt like the good times could stretch on forever. That feeling never lasts. When the state clamped down and the wider push against liquor finally reached this bend in the river, the foundation of the place washed out overnight. Take away the bottles and there was not much left to do here except look at the water and wonder what came next. Most people chose to leave instead. Today, if you drive through the area, you would barely know Keokuk Falls had ever existed. The noise is gone. The music is gone. The only real sign is a stone marker by the road telling you there used to be a town here. A town loud enough that people said you could not sleep properly within miles of it. Now the road is quiet, the grass has grown over whatever was left of the streets, and cars pass by without slowing down. It feels less like a town that died and more like the set of a story that was yanked away the moment the lights came up. The lesson is not subtle. If you build an entire community on a legal loophole and a drinking problem, sooner or later the loophole closes and the problem moves on. Keokuk Falls was basically a speakeasy on stilts. Once the music stopped, there was nothing underneath it but mud and bad decisions. So ask yourself this: would you really want to build a life in a place whose entire legacy can be summed up as we sold illegal booze until the law finally caught up? Because when a town has only one product and that product is breaking the rules, the ending is always the same. So far, our towns have mostly been haunted by their own bad choices. The next one is haunted by fire, lost history, and something unsettling hiding just below the streets. Number 5. Muskogeem. Most people know Muskogeem from country songs and small-town pride, the blue-collar city with river views, local festivals, and just enough grit to feel authentic. You get the picture of barbecue smoke, college kids, tribal art, a Friday night game somewhere under bright lights. What you do not usually hear about is the underground jail, the downtown that caught fire more than once, or the idea some locals quietly share that parts of this place never really cooled down. If you walk the old core of Muskogeem in daylight, it feels almost normal. Red brick streets, historic facades, the usual mix of law offices, pawn shops, and small businesses trying to hang on. But look closer and you notice the scars. This city did not just have one bad fire. It got hit hard twice. Big blazes that ate their way through the business district and turned layers of history into ash. Stores that had survived the Great Depression did not survive the flames. Family names that used to sit on the glass are now just memories in a box somewhere, if they are remembered at all. Underneath that, literally, is an even older story. Long before the fires, this region sat on the route of the Trail of Tears. Forced marches of native people passed through here in winter and summer, and not everyone made it to the end. Those journeys left no glossy photographs, just unmarked pain folded into the ground. Later, when Muskogeem grew and built itself up, it did what a lot of cities did. It dug into that ground and put pieces of its own darkness down there too. Ask around and you hear about the jail cells believed to sit under parts of downtown, old holding rooms and tunnels that once moved prisoners and others out of public view. People on ghost tours talk about hearing footsteps under the pavement when there should not be anyone there at all, or about odd knocking sounds that seem to come from below the floorboards. Up on the hills, places like Ataloa Lodge and other historic buildings have their own reputations. White figures at the end of hallways, doors that ease themselves open, lights that refuse to stay off. Of course, you could write it off as drafty construction and overworked wiring. That is the easy version. By the time night drops, the city changes tone. The red brick looks darker. Some walls still carry the faint outline of old burn marks. If you know where to look, there are a few neon signs holding out over the sidewalks, but between them the gaps feel deep, black pockets between old buildings. Cars still move along the main routes, yet a couple of streets over you can find yourself walking on brick that has seen more fire and fear than most people will know in a lifetime, with the odd sense that the real Muskogeem might be the one humming just below street level. None of this is an accident. Muskogeem is the product of crossroads and industry, a place built fast along busy routes with flammable materials and unequal lives stacked on top of each other. When hard times came, the flames showed up first, and the poorest residents paid longest. The city is like a history book someone tried to burn twice. The pages are charred, but you can still read what is left in the cracks if you are willing to look. So here is the uncomfortable question. Would you feel relaxed knowing there may be more city under your feet, cells and tunnels and leftover memories, than there is above? Ground. In Muskogeem, the ghost tours are not just Halloween entertainment. They are one of the few ways people have to walk through a story that never really ended. And if burned out downtowns and underground jails are not enough for you, the next stop brings a full military fort, foreign war dead and spirits that some visitors swear still march after dark. Number 4. Fort Reno. By daylight, Fort Reno looks like the kind of place your history teacher would love. White barracks lined up on trimmed grass, a small museum with uniforms in glass cases, the United States flag pulling tight in the prairie wind. School buses roll in, volunteers give talks about cavalry posts and Indian territory, and everything feels clean and well-behaved, like the past has been filed away properly. By night, that same fort turns into one of the few places in Oklahoma where ghosts are basically on the event calendar. You do not just hear spooky stories here. You can actually buy a ticket. Fort Reno began life in the 1870s as a military camp built to protect the Cheyenne and Arapaho people at the Darlington Agency during the Indian Wars on the Southern Plains. Later, it watched over land runs, hosted famous cavalry units, and slowly turned from raw frontier outpost into a permanent brick and stone post with families, chapels, and stables. When the shooting stopped on the prairie, the fort did not retire. During World War II, it housed about 1,300 German prisoners of war, along with Italians shipped in from faraway battlefields. A separate walled section of the cemetery holds the POW dead, 62 German and 8 Italian graves, including the grave of Johannes Kunze, a German prisoner killed by his own comrades after they accused him of being a traitor. So you have native scouts, frontier soldiers, officers' families, settlers, and foreign prisoners, all stacked on one modest patch of Oklahoma ground. It is not hard to see why the place feels heavy before anyone mentions ghosts. The regular post cemetery stretches across a low hill, rows of white markers standing over the grass while the wind blows without much to slow it down. Visitors talk about how quiet it is out there, how you can hear the flag ropes clicking against the pole and almost nothing else. Then the sun drops and Fort Reno changes character again. The fort runs something called historical spirit tours, official after-dark walks that take visitors through the old parade ground, past long brick barracks and out to the cemetery while guides tell stories about what people have heard and seen. Guests carry lanterns or flashlights and listen for boot steps on the gravel when no one is moving. The faint rhythm of marching where there is only open grass, or the sound of children's voices in former barracks that now sit dark and locked. Some swear they have watched lights flick on and off in empty buildings or felt someone brush past in a doorway when every person on the tour is accounted for. Maybe it is nothing more than suggestion and a good script. Maybe it is something less eager to be explained. Out on the plains around the fort, there is very little city glow to soften the night. When the tours stop talking for a moment, you are left with the sound of wind running over the flat land, through the trees and past the stone walls. The outlines of the buildings are sharp against the sky, but everything between them feels like shadow and memory. Fort Reno starts to feel less like a museum and more like a filing cabinet for unfinished stories. The folders are neatly labeled, but when the gusts pick up, you can almost hear them rattle. This is what happens when war, land seizure, prisoner camps, and quiet burials all get crammed into the same set of coordinates. The history here is not abstract. It is carved on stones in at least 3 languages and stitched into flags folded over caskets. So ask yourself honestly, would you really sign up to spend the night in a place where entire tours are built around the idea that your group is not the only one walking those halls? If you ever go, remember this is not just a moody backdrop for social media. It is a working cemetery and a real post where people lived, fought, and died. And yet, for all its ghosts, Fort Reno is at least honest about what happened here. Our next location has its horror story written right into the name of the place, and people still cannot fully agree on what is really going on. Number 3. Dead Women's Crossing. From the highway, it is just a little country bridge over a quiet creek outside Weatherford. A strip of pavement, a rail, some trees leaning over the water. In daylight, it feels forgettable, the kind of place you pass at 50 miles an hour and never think about again. But the map calls it Dead Women's Crossing for a reason. Up close, this is the spot tied to one of Oklahoma's most disturbing murders, and nobody ever wrote a clean ending for it. In 1905, a young schoolteacher named Katie DeWitt James left her husband and filed for divorce. That alone was dangerous in that era. She took her baby daughter, boarded a train, and told her family she was going to visit relatives and look for work. Somewhere between that promise and her new life, Katie vanished. Weeks later, searchers found her body near the creek not far from this bridge. Her head was gone. The baby was discovered alive near a farmhouse. The main suspect, a woman named Fanny Norton who had been seen traveling with Katie, died from poison before any trial. Officials called it suicide. The case went cold. The gossip never did. Over time, the facts hardened into legend. People began to say that if you stand on the bridge at night, you can hear a woman crying by the water when the road is empty, or a child sobbing softly underneath the chorus of insects. Drivers have talked about hearing wagon wheels on wood even though the old wooden bridge is long gone, and about seeing a pale figure at the side of the road that disappears when the headlights reach it. Paranormal teams have come out with recorders and gone home with strange snippets of a woman's voice on their files, short phrases that sound like calling for help or calling for a child. Maybe it is radio noise, maybe it is nerves. Either way, the name of the place wraps around every sound you hear. The setting does the rest. There are no streetlights out here at night, just the thin glow of distant houses and whatever the moon decides to share. The creek moves in the dark under your feet. Crickets and frogs fill the air, and every time a car crosses and drives away, the silence that falls behind it feels a little heavier. If you kill the engine and turn off the lights, you are suddenly very aware that a young mother once came down this road and never made it home. Some locals say she is still walking the banks, still trying to reach the baby she had to leave behind. What happened at Dead Women's Crossing is what could happen when the law barely noticed women, when divorce marked you, and when a rural crime could slip quietly into the background. This is what it looks like when a woman's safety becomes a footnote. The town moved on. The bridge name never did. So be honest with yourself. Would you really park here? Sit in the dark and listen, knowing a young mother vanished on this exact patch of pavement? If you ever visit, remember people live nearby, and this is not a stage for shouting or careless ghost hunting. Keep your voice down, respect the ground, and decide for yourself how long you want to stay. If that already feels too personal and too tragic, the next city only scales things up, with grand Victorian buildings that seem to collect ghosts the way other towns collect postcards. Number 2. Guthrie is the kind of town that looks harmless on a fridge magnet. Downtown is all Victorian brick, pretty facades, the Pollard Theater marquee glowing at dusk, and bed and breakfast that look like they were built for antique postcards. On paper, it is the first state capital, a weekend history trip waiting for families and bus tours. What the brochures are slower to mention is that this neat little square mile might be the most haunted patch of real estate in Oklahoma. You do not just visit Guthrie for history. You walk straight into a ghost tour hub that never really clocks out. Take the Stone Lion Inn. By day, it is a charming inn with lace curtains and carved wood, the kind of place your aunt would rave about. Before that, it was a funeral home. Before that, it was a family home where a little girl supposedly died after being given the wrong cough medicine. People who stay there talk about small footsteps in the hallway when all the children are accounted for, toys that move, covers that twitch like someone knee-high is climbing onto the bed. Reviews mention doors opening on their own and guests being tapped awake on the cheek around 2 in the morning. That is not exactly the kind of amenity you can list on a booking site, but it keeps the rooms full. A few blocks away, the Bluebell Saloon wears its history less politely. It started as a saloon and a brothel, the place you went when you wanted trouble and did not want your name written down anywhere. There were fights, there were guns, there were deals that never made the church bulletin. Today, people talk about it as one of the most investigated buildings in the state, with disembodied voices caught on recorders, shadowy figures on the staircase, and women's voices that seem to come from rooms that no longer exist. On paper, it is just another old brick building on a corner. In practice, it is the kind of place even seasoned investigators treat with a little extra respect. Walk downtown on a weekend night and Guthrie's split personality really shows. Tourists drift along the red brick streets, holding little flashlights, while guides spin stories about saloons, seances, and funerals in the same breath. Streetlights throw warm yellow on the front of buildings that once held parlors, coffins, and card tables, sometimes all within a block. You think you signed up for a history walk, then realize you are basically threading your way through a long, narrow graveyard with better architecture. Every pretty balcony has a rumor. Every restored facade comes with just enough missing years to make you wonder what did not get written down. Guthrie is what happens when you stack money, politics, religion, saloons, and funeral homes into one tight downtown and then let 130 years go by. It is like a Victorian dollhouse nobody ever bothered to spiritually clean. Every room has its own story and almost none of them are kid-friendly. So here is the real question. Would you actually book a bed and breakfast in a town where the most enthusiastic reviews spend more time on footsteps and whispers in the hallway than on the free breakfast? You can absolutely stay here as long as you know exactly what kind of history you are sleeping inside. And yet for all its hauntings, Guthrie is still open for business. Our final stop is different. It is the kind of place locals only whisper about, cops watch closely, and property owners really do not want you anywhere near after dark. Number 1. Spencer. On the surface, Spencer is about as normal as an Oklahoma suburb can get. 2-lane roads, cars moving slow, small churches, a school, modest houses, with kids' bikes in the yard. It looks like the kind of town where the most dramatic thing that happens is a late utility bill. But out in the trees, past the last tidy streetlight, down an unmarked path, there is a concrete hole in the ground. Locals call one thing the Purple Church. You will not find it on any brochure. You will definitely hear about it in a whispered conversation. What is actually there is simple and ugly. The remains of some old structure, mostly gone now, just a foundation and a sunken concrete basement in the woods. The walls are sprayed with graffiti, upside-down crosses, symbols people argue about online, phrases that look like they were written more for shock than for spelling. For decades, rumors have wrapped around this spot. Stories about strange gatherings at night, chanting, screaming, animal bones, even sacrifices. None of it has ever been fully confirmed in any official way, but the stories have lived a lot longer than the original building did. Police have been called out to the area more than once, not because of demons, but because of humans. Teenagers sneaking in after dark, groups of thrill seekers with flashlights and beer, people who think the word legend also means no consequences. Property owners have made it very clear they want everyone gone. There are no tickets, no tour guides, no welcome sign. There are no lights either. If you go in, you are walking into private land where nobody promised to come pull you back out. The atmosphere does the rest of the work. The road turns to dirt, the trees close in over your head, and suddenly the world is just branches and your own breathing. At some point you see a break in the ground and a short flight of concrete steps that lead down into a square of darkness. No windows, no exits except the way you came. At night there is almost no glow from town, only whatever the sky gives you. Every crack of a branch sounds like a footstep that stopped just behind you. Even people who do not believe in anything supernatural come back saying the same thing. Something down there feels wrong, even when the only thing in the room is bad spray paint and an empty floor. Underneath the horror movie details, the ingredients are depressingly familiar. A forgotten piece of private land, a lot of religious fear from all directions. Bored kids looking for a dare, an urban legend that grows a little every time someone posts a shaky video. Nobody in charge ever really cleaned it up or claimed it, so the legend expanded to fill the silence. The Purple Church works like a psychological mirror. People bring their worst fears down those stairs, and most of the time they find exactly what they were looking for, whether it is a ghost, the idea of the devil, or just proof that they can scare themselves. So you have to ask, past the jokes and bravado, would you really risk climbing down into a concrete pit on posted private land, in the dark, in a place where even locals just say, do not go there, just to prove to your friends you are not scared? Out here, the biggest danger is not some horned thing in the corner. It is a mad mix of trespassing charges, unstable concrete, and the simple fact that bad people sometimes use hidden places for bad reasons. If you want to live a long life and not end up in the news for the strangest possible headline, this is one location you are better off visiting through other people's videos. Because at the end of the day, some places are creepy not just because of ghosts, but because of what living, breathing humans might decide to do when they know nobody is watching. Not every pretty little town on a postcard is hiding a happy ending. Some are sitting on unfinished wars and burned main streets, some are holding unsolved murders under a country bridge, and some are keeping a concrete basement in the woods that nobody really wants to admit is theirs. The map looks clean, the stories under it are not. So tell me, which place got under your skin the most tonight? The young mother who vanished at the bridge, the cozy inn that still smells a little too much, like its days as a funeral home, or that nameless hole in the trees outside Spencer where the scariest thing might be whoever walks in after you. If this made you look at Oklahoma a little differently, tap like, drop your own hometown legends in the comments, and hit subscribe so you do not miss the next countdown into America's strangest corners.